Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Cook County Board of Commissioners special meeting today, Tuesday, June 20th. And the first thing we'd like to do is note that we have this special meeting and we have our minutes, which have been included. And our second item on the agenda is to do a courtroom walkthrough with Judge Cuzzo, and we'd like to welcome you today, Judge. Appreciate you being here.
I appreciate being here.
So at this point, we're going to take off from 8:45 to 9:45, so it'll be about an hour-long pause as we go through and have an opportunity to get a tour and get a lot of information about our courtroom, about the spaces that we have available for juries and a variety of different things.
In the space that we don't have available for juries.
There you go.
More accurately.
All right, well, thank you, and we'll right now close to take our courtroom walk. Let's move the microphone over then for you.
Thanks, Ann. All right. Great. Are we on?
Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to our Cook County Board of Commissioners special meeting. We just finished with our tour of the judicial area with Judge Cuzzo, and now we are back to talk about restorative justice. And we have an advisory council update, and Inger, we'd like to welcome you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sullivan. We are excited to be here. Several of us are here who have been part of the very beginning of this. And so we have a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you so much, James, for inviting us here. And we would love to. And of course, we have Commissioner Stacy Hawkins, who is also on our advisory council with Restorative Justice, and appreciate her time and commitment to this program as well. All right, so Cook County, Minnesota Restorative Justice Program. I actually was introduced to this by someone that some of you might know. He was a probation officer for 30 plus years, Steve Borrud, and he actually was the one that invited me to a restorative justice presentation, and really believed that this was the key for this community in reaching, especially for youth. And so he believed in it quite strongly, and I just really want to mention him and appreciate truly the mentorship that he's given me at the beginning of this and of this program, to really understand what's going to be important to focus on as we start this program, and building trust with the community has been a lot of insights that he's given over the years. So I just really appreciate, and he and Kay, then a year after that, actually went ahead and moved to Duluth. She had a great opportunity for a job there, and he continued his work there in Duluth as well. So that's why he's not with us today. Otherwise, I'm sure he would be with us, but in spirit he is. Okay.
I'm sure. Is it okay if we do introductions for everybody and those in the crowd?
Yeah, lovely. Lovely.
So we know.
Yes, thank you. All right, so why don't we start with our wonderful case coordinator, Mike Smea. And he's been serving with us almost a year, not quite. Over a year now, yes, over a year, time flies. So wonderful to have him, as we've moved him from quarter time to half-time recently, and oversees a lot of our cases. And then we have Bob Heskey.
Who's a volunteer. I've lost the number of years, 6 or 8, somewhere in that range.
From the very beginning. He's been a wonderful, stable foundation for us to keep moving forward. Great support. Thank you, Bob.
Carolyn Schmidt, I'm one of the most recent volunteers.
Yes.
I'm with her, and I'm here to support the general line.
I'm Phil Grave. I'm with Ruby's Pantry and volunteer and other things in the community.
Great. Thanks for being here, Phil. And then we have...
I'm just observing.
But he's been a strong supporter of many things, programs, and restorative justice and social justice and all those things throughout the years. So thank you, Mike. All right, and my name is Inger Andrus, and I am the program director of Restorative Justice. We are also to know that we are underneath the North Shore Healthcare Foundation, just to clarify that as well. So this is a program of a nonprofit in the community called North Shore Healthcare Foundation. And so I serve on the board of that as well. And we have taken on as our new strategic planning to actually have incubation projects and programs to launch. We have launched care partners into the community. We've launched Oral Health Task Force, which then actually became absorbed by the Sawtooth Mountain Clinic. And now Restorative Justice is our third incubation program, which hopefully we will be launching here as a nonprofit eventually in the next year or two. All right, let's begin. Yes, great. So I guess I have the slide. I see arrows.
Maybe you can just advance it manually, Janet.
Yep. Thank you. So I want to very much honor the origins of restorative practice. As you see here, this is an indigenous medicine wheel, and if it wasn't for the practices that we have learned from, part of those origins, the 7 grandfather teachings, really understand that it's a way of life where it is community-based. And, definitely we have had, actually, and you'll see in this presentation, a wonderful partnership with Grand Portage, and are very honored to learn from them through this process. And so we're just thankful for First Nations, for indigenous culture that has shown us from many years ago of how they did things, and it truly was a way of life. And so we as volunteers even have a healing circle that we meet as volunteers once a month, as continually trying to keep in mind this is a way of life for us. It's just not a technique. It is truly a practice that we try to embody in what we do as human beings. All right, so the 5 R's of restorative justice, if there's a way to get back. Yep. Relationships, respect, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. Those are really 5 very important R's. And Kay Pranis, I know some of you might have heard of her. She was here even before all of this happened in trying to lay the groundwork, and she is the queen of teaching restorative practices in circles, and so we are very honored, obviously, with her teachings as well. So, okay, next, please. So, the Cook County Restorative Justice Program seeks to provide alternative to juvenile delinquency or juvenile prosecution by providing a diversion program that is currently branching into becoming a pre-court or pre-charge alternative in appropriate juvenile cases. But understand that our Cook County Restorative Justice is not limited to juvenile cases, but also to adult misdemeanor cases referrals as well. And then the most recent thing that we've brought in, and that will go into more detail, this is just a summary at the beginning here, is the truancy program. And I will give a little background to so many of you know with Public Health and Human Services, Grace Bouchard, and she served on the board with the foundation as well for many years, and she approached me when we first took on restorative justice. She approached me immediately, and she said, Inger, it would be wonderful if you could start thinking about truancy in the future. And at that point, I was like, I had no idea how that would connect, and so she has been very diligent and patient and continually bringing it forward, and lo and behold, we are here. So it takes a whole village to do this, for sure, and I really appreciate her input over the years with that. So it is a non-punitive, especially in the state of Minnesota. Rather, it's relational, and it builds trust with the student liaison. That's who we call the truancy coordinator, is really the student liaison coordinator, to make it user-friendly for families and students, who oversee the cases referred by the school, ISD 166, which includes logging attendance, records, and other truant behaviors. The student liaison coordinator walks alongside students and families, providing information about local county resources and other possible resources to bring restoration for students to attend school. So that's an overall summary of that. Next, please. The goals of this program for our youth is to have, again, an alternative route for juvenile justice system, which emphasizes the restorative justice with appropriate consequences in order to protect public safety, while reducing costs and caseload burdens on juvenile courts and juvenile systems, and to minimize juvenile crime and recidivism, reoccurrence. We don't want reoccurrence. And then to recognize that teenagers' brains are not yet developed, and as such are at an increased risk for impulsive, aggressive, and irresponsible behavior. So these same brains are also malleable and teachable and may greatly benefit from restorative practices that encourage ownership of one's behavior with inclusive, interactive dialogue. So that's very much with respect. When we sit in these meetings with them, we are there to listen, to learn from how their life is, what they are going through in their life, and understanding it. And in that process, it's a very important piece to understand context of what's going on as well.
I'd like to add, just from a lot that I'm learning, people who have experienced ACEs and traumatic events, their brain development is actually slower and takes longer as well, and so that just kind of
Right.
builds, compounds over time too, within families and generations even, so.
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of a double whammy.
Right. There was a situation that we had a youth who, at the time, had just been initially diagnosed with autism, and it was one of the cases that we were referred to. And at that time, they were just understanding it, and just think we were able to, get to the appropriate resources, right? And then also to understand that that wasn't held on their record, and then they were given, more tools to be able to understand how to handle things going on inside. There's a situation of other, things that are going on that are just being discovered in a youth that we don't even realize won't show themselves necessarily right away. And the more resources we get for different diagnoses within this county, then we're able to identify earlier and help them get the appropriate means for where they're at. So very, very key in not having them go down a route that was not really because of, it's because there's some things that they don't understand how are tools to have. So develop and strengthen culturally responsive court diversion for juveniles within the county. The other goal is to promote with victim reconciliation and the payment of restitution to those harmed, and build trust with truant student families and give guidance to county resources. So we're including also not only just case referrals from district attorney and the court and probation, but also we're talking about just in general from the school with truant students. Number 6, truancy goals are developing connections with students and families to reestablish school attendance. So that's all part of the goals of the program. Next slide, please. So why do we need RJ in Cook County? Go ahead, next slide. So it really does. That's part of Steve Barwood's vision that he had, was this gives youth second chances. And not only second chances, part of then this next phase is if we can get pre-charge, which that will be coming up in the future, we can really keep their records cleaner, so that when they go out for their first job and when we're building them up for success, right, instead of failure. So not every investigation, case, or conflict is appropriate for the criminal justice system. And so sometimes the things, it can be part of the justice system is that we find that offender-focused instead of victim-focused. Negative stigma that discourages a change in behavior. That stigma created can actually impact, especially a youth, to feel that they're a bad person and that they are not a productive member of the society. This can start spiraling when you don't have a confidence built up in yourself yet, and you're at a very vulnerable point in your life where you can take on a very kind of dark sense about yourself instead of really understanding that you have different choices that you can make. Also, the offender is not encouraged to internalize the impact of his or her actions, so sometimes it just desensitizes the offenders to the system when you just kind of aren't really seeing the person that you offended and really working through it together. So it really helps them to start absorbing and understanding empathy and owning their actions as well. And then, just understanding that it does have an effect on community. And so sometimes our judicial system doesn't really show the connection to community harm when something happens. And so it helps understand, like we might bring in some deputies for the final face-to-face conference that we have, and have the deputies explain, the kind of the effects on the community, and for them to hear that from them and have that kind of interaction and have it be full circle is part of what we have done. And Bob, you've been a part of that one especially. Next slide, please. So our current process to be eligible, delinquency at this point, prosecution must be completed and transmitted to the Cook County Attorney's Office. And as I said, we're moving into this pre-charge, but at this point, I'm just going through where we're at. And then even the truancy prosecution also must be completed and transmitted from ISD 166 in Cook County to the Cook County Attorney's Office, and then from the Attorney's Office or her designee will screen each case received from law enforcement to determine if restorative justice is eligible and make a referral within the prosecutor's discretion. And then the case will then be referred to the restorative justice program for review of eligibility and discuss it at our weekly meeting between program chair, case coordinator, to make a final decision for participation. In appropriate cases, the party who's harmed is referred to the restorative justice from any of these agencies: the county attorney, probation court, the sheriff, ISD 166, and Grand Portage. Next, please. So why else do we need this in Cook County? A small community is obviously, we have limited resources, so it makes relationships a very key important thing when we see each other at the grocery store and the local park, and how are we going to interact and continue life after things that happen like this. So also in a smaller, tight-knit, isolated place, the ripple effect of each harm is felt even more intensely. And so we really want to lower juvenile recidivism or repeating offenses, and so having them start to see that they can choose other ways and options to handle things and not repeat their offenses. The ripple effect of healing reaches many in the community as well. We had a lovely situation in Grand Portage where there was some vandalism that happened, and the lovely part of it was that the youth that participated in it ended up, when they went through the restorative justice program, meeting with this person, and she was able to tell her story. They didn't know it was hers. She was older. She had just kind of tears of how meaningful this place was to her, and it ended up being where, for reparation, she really would like them to make a sign that says, certain things on it that represent her heritage and importance. And they did it, and it ended up being like a mentorship between her and these youth. And she has actually said, for the record, she says, "You just let everybody know that I fully support restorative justice, and I'll do it again." And so we actually, even though it can be difficult at the beginning and getting all the pieces and parts and listening to all the different dynamics and meeting face to face, but when it actually, the magic happens, is when truly sharing meaningful conversation and reparation actually occurs, and people see it, and it's followed through with, and it makes a difference. We already did that. We can go ahead to the next slide. So I'm sure you've seen the cliff analogy, with many things. We at the foundation have used this as well for healthcare needs and trying to understand preventative means in order for us to catch before people go off the cliff, and then you have so many more expenses that go on if you get over that cliff. So really, in social determinants of health, have been why we do assessments and various things, and trying to understand what that is. And so really similarly to that is how we see what restorative practices do for youth, especially, is that it really is trying to help them understand that their life is purposeful and meaningful, and it doesn't have to go down this path. And so that kind of catching before the fall and all the things that go on after that, trying to understand if there's any kind of dependency on substance misuse or various things. And so all that is part of, we have 2 volunteer facilitators who have been trained 16 hours, and they're assigned to each case, 2 of them, and so they are given training to try to understand and see if those things are part of conversations when they sit down with the youth, and just being more mindful of that. Next slide, please. So then, we've talked a bit more about we've talked about the case referrals. This now is our next we've just brought on, she's not able to be here, Shelley Starkey is our new truancy coordinator, and she is quarter time. She's been at the school every week pretty much for the last 3 months, developing relationships with students, and so the student liaison coordinator acts as a central point of contact for truancy referrals, serving as a liaison between schools, courts, and social services. And so it is a collaboration with the Dean of Students. Sarah Lukoski right now is that person right now, and represents representatives of the county attorney's office, the district court, sheriff's office, and PHHS. So again, the coordinator walks alongside parents and truant students to make recommendations, resources, build relationships, trying to address any barriers, trying to understand the situation, and encourage students to feel more confident to come back to school. And they also provide ongoing mentorship to truant students, both as a group and individuals. The coordinator organizes and tracks all data related to each individual case, assists and partner representatives with aspects of each particular case, necessary referrals, meeting coordination, and follow-up. Next slide, please. Okay, so that gives you an overall. This is then the big picture of who actually runs this program. And so we have a lovely volunteer-based, at the very beginning, actually, when we started this program, I did present it to the county board, who then at that time were unanimously, and I believe you were on, voted to be the fiscal agent for us to be able to start getting grants. But at that point in time, District Attorney Molly Hicken was also a part of things, and her research into best practice and what really was being effective was that it needed to be community-based more than county-based. And so at that point, we decided, even though the county said they were willing to be the fiscal agent, that it probably wasn't going to be the best way to go about this, and making sure community was on board, so it brought stability, sustainability. And so that's when we went ahead with, there was, at that time, if the North Shore Healthcare Foundation was doing what they were doing, we probably would have gone with them, but they weren't at that stage yet. So a local church was actually very supportive and allowed us to become, that they were the fiscal agent, so we could write for grants as a nonprofit. So that's kind of a background. And so we were able to get money for these 16-hour trainings, which was the biggest part back in 2018. Then we actually had our first training of about 16, and you were one of those. So exciting, Bob. And that was, so we developed an advisory committee in order for us to have collaboration in partnership within this community. It was really important to have key people, or key organizations, I should say. So we had and continue to have on our advisory committee North Shore Healthcare Foundation, the Grand Portage Band of Chippewa. We have actually Chief Tribal Bobby Deshaw, which is wonderful, and also Public Health and Human Services of Grand Portage Director Jackie Kozlowski is also on our advisory council. We have Cook County Commissioner Stacy Hawkins. We have then actually Allison McIntyre, Public Health and Human Services also serves. We have Keaton Riley of our probation system. We have then Molly Hicken as attorney of county attorney. We have actually for the sheriff's office, Will Sandstrom serves on our advisory council. And then Megan Myers has been on our the school principal. And then we also have Lindsay Gao, thank you, from Violence Prevention Center, along with some very important key community members as well that serve on that advisory council. So we're very blessed with that. And we meet monthly. And we are starting to get policy and procedure in place for us to start venturing into the nonprofit world. So victim offender conferencing is what we've been trained for, or multi-party. And we're actually, I'll show in a few slides, we're actually going to start incorporating healing circles as well. But the broad range of cases referred from multiple agencies, adult and juvenile, pre-charge, post-charge, and sentenced as part of probation are really what our cases have been. Next slide, please. So this shows one of our annual 2-day conferences, 16-hour conference for recruiting facilitators, and beautifully was held. Very honored to have be invited at Grand Portage Lodge and Casino. They paid for all the luncheon, for the conference room. We just were very honored with sacred ceremony before each morning, before we started the conferencing for both days. John Moran was there to do a prayer and to it was just a lovely experience, a very humbling, definitely learning, a lovely time. So that happened in 2021 after, or kind of at the tail end of COVID, which is great that we could meet in person. And trying to think what else. So I think it's important to also note this because our trainer, Ted Lewis, who came from University of Minnesota in Duluth, UMD, it was important that before we had this training to actually do several months of having a key leadership team from Grand Portage band members to meet and to be the ones that actually were the hosts of this, and that they and that it was through that time with Ted over Zoom over several months that then they also included informational meetings for a couple of them, so that then the communities could start to understand way before we even had the conference of what this was about, and really get their feedback and hear what their concerns were, and really listen, right? So it was a very key item to make sure that they lovely how they just incorporated the 7 grandfather teachings and were able to just bless us with many of the customs and traditions. And so we are very thankful for that. And as a result, in several band members now are also facilitators, trained facilitators to take on these cases. We, as partners now, more than, we wanted to make sure that there was a venue that if they decided to do this in a way that was more with their customs and didn't want to assume anything, and so at that point in time offered that we would support in any way that if they wanted to, branch and do a form that was more customary for them, that we would love to just support them in that. And at the time, the decision that came across was we are all members of Cook County, and we are all doing this together. And so they did not want to have any, so we are truly lovely, very honored to have that partnership together. And so that was a choice that was very clear to do this as a team effort. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I did mention Steve, and we talked about the 16 hours. Each facilitator does need to go through a background check because we are working with youth especially. So that's a key thing. That doesn't mean that they can't have anything in their background. It's just that there are certain key things that we want to make sure when working with youth that we're being responsible for. Yep, and safe. Okay, next slide. So this is our most recent training that we had in Schroeder this last November at the town hall there. And we try to change locations. The year before, as I said, was out in Grand Portage, and then we did it in Schroeder, and now we're probably this year going to do it in Grand Marais, so that everybody has kind of that opportunity in different regions of the county. And we invited actually anybody along the North Shore, including Lake County, to start participating, because to come to it, even though they might not be volunteers, we want to start to expand, and we feel it's very meaningful. Even if you take this back to work with you, this training, it's meaningful for any situation that you're in, to learn how to create a safe space, a container to work through conflict management is pretty amazing. So we were very blessed to have, we actually had 35 sign up, or 30 sign up, and because it was one of those really nasty kind of ice storm-ish times that we woke up to, we didn't have the full crew. I think it was about 24 or 25 that actually made it, but that's pretty good still for that kind of. And we had a lot of people from Finland. Friends of Finland actually are, not only did they want to start one up there, but at this time they're being mentored and doing cases with us right now. They're driving all the way in to do these cases. Amazing commitment to learn the process in order to be able to take it back and work with their youth. So, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a quote from Ted Lewis, our trainer, who's just done a marvelous job of helping us understand responsibility to make things right again with the victim. So he always says having a response ability happens by listening to how the harm affected the victim to gain empathy. And that this is all part of getting to the heart center. Excuse the graphicness of the heart, but it definitely is key that the facilitators know that that's part of what they're trying to bring participants to, is a safe, well-prepared dialogue that helps both sides to connect and to see each other as human beings. Participants start to change from the inside out at a heart level. Next slide, please. So this is a little slide that he uses usually, which is the short route of from ownership to reparation really is not as effective. The longer route, which is more effective and actually has life change and impact, is when you start from ownership to actually having empathy, hearing another side of the story, not realizing how it affected somebody's life, what it actually did to them, what they all had to, if somebody steals a purse and the keys are in there and all the things that happen, and and the feeling of not being safe and being fearful and all the things that they hear from a participant of not realizing what effect it had on a person's life is very important for ownership and reparation. Next slide, please. So instead of a quick fix, restorative dialogue actually seeks the longer route through empathy, experience. Victims and offenders see the humanity of each other. They lead to a richer, long-term reparative outcome, understand another's perspective other than their own, and again, safer to see each other locally at a grocery store or the park. Next slide, please. Our expectations, whoops, I have a typo in there, pretty big one. Sorry about that. But our expectations at this point in time is, as you heard, moving from being under the umbrella of the North Shore Healthcare Foundation to actually being incubated to becoming a 501c3 nonprofit. We are very thankful that we have 2 programs in the state who have taken the time, and we have spent, and especially I'm very thankful for Mike Smay, our case coordinator, who has really made sure that we have created these ties and bonds with Carleton County Restorative Justice Program, and then also with the Greater Lakes County, Brainerd County program that are very successful at this time in what they're working with. So a wonderful best practices that we are exchanging ideas, and they are sharing policy and procedure with us as well, and we're learning tremendously from them. So one of them is through the county, the other one is a nonprofit, and learning the benefits and the pros and cons of different types of ways of doing it. Cook County Restorative Justice makes a connection with all the victims, underlying offenses in each referral. The contact is either verbal, in writing, and describes to each party harmed how it works and the expectations of the offender participating in the program, and then a discussion of the restitution with the victim will also occur. It's really important, even though the party who is harmed may not want to meet with the offender, we do have meetings with them just so that we can listen to how their life has been impacted by this, try to understand what would be best reparations for the situation, and then we will get actually a surrogate to take care of if the victim is not wanting to participate in that process. So it's really important that they just know they're supported, and that we just want to hear what they've gone through, and then allow that to help us and guide us with reparation of what the participant can do for that. And then Cook County Restorative Justice will give the county attorney's office progress updates, at least monthly, sometimes even weekly, depending on our caseload. And then also to understand that the student liaison coordinator also works closely with the dean of students and makes contacts with the student families. And so just to understand that this year alone has been at least 3 times, if not more, than what they've ever seen for truancy. We all know that just different changes with COVID and how remote learning, not being at school, the kids starting to get anxious if they haven't been around other kids, how it all starts to have an effect and play on their minds, and not wanting to get back to school can be intimidating. All those things are part of what we're seeing as part of the truancy situations. And so really understanding that it is in much need right now. Next slide, please. This is how we have incredible volunteers who are IT retirees, and they have put together some marvelous process software programs online for us. And one of these, I just wanted to take a screenshot for you to see that each referral system is given a link to be able to go onto this Google Doc and fill out in order to refer a case to us. And they would pick which agency that they're from, whether it's probation, county, sheriff, high school, Grand Portage. And so that's where they will go through a series of questions in order to actually type in what happened and all the details. And so we have not only this system then the next slide, please. So that's then also each facilitator, volunteer is given a link that then allows them to actually go in to the contact log for every time that they reach out to participants. We make sure that all that is logged in our system, which is up and secure in a cloud at this time. We don't have an actual location where all that information, it's held up securely that we pay for. Next slide, please. This is then, for instance, what they need to sign off with. This is just a screenshot showing what the facilitators need to do, approximately what the date needs to be done by to help them understand, and then they actually put in the date and whether or not they completed it or if it's still pending. And so that way our case coordinator can go in and actually see what's been done, what hasn't been done for each case, and it is truly, I don't think there's another system out there like this, because it's been designed specifically for our program. It's pretty amazing what Grant Adams has done with this, and also Steve DeShane. Next slide. So, the offender is expected to complete all reparations agreed upon in face-to-face conference with the other participant, and the reparations required will be recorded by the facilitators assigned to the case. Once the party who did the harm has completed the reparations and fulfilled all the program requirements, the offender and referral party will receive a letter confirming that the participant has successfully completed the program, and in some cases, the citation of diversion will be dismissed against the offender, etc., in a formally resolved way. The truancy program will be recognizing those students and families who have made the effort to comply with school regulations for school attendance as well. So we do, once again, follow through is key in any kind of program like this, and for the student to feel that their life is meaningful and worthwhile to the point that we complete it, or any participant as far as that goes, and give them a certificate of completion and send that out to them to let them know. Next. So we've had several different partners who have donated or who have gifted and granted us over the years to help us. As you can see, a lot of community members that have helped us keep this going. And it's been so humbling and honoring to serve with these volunteers and see how this has, and those that now are staff, how truly we have gotten so much support for this. It has been just very touching. And let's see, so yeah, that just kind of shows the progress. The most recent grant, Otto Bremer Trust, we were just honored in that they said recently that they are wanting to grant us some funds, so that's been exciting. Next, please. So this one has some history to it. This is actually Molly and myself, Molly Hicken. We did a presentation to the Moose County Correctional Facility. And we were invited there to give a presentation, and little did we know, we had no idea that we were given this tour, and it's just incredible how much the inmates have actually, they have their own restorative justice program. They teach other inmates. They have a waiting list of 100 to get into these classes that are like 6 weeks long. And so they're really teaching them how life, you can move on from some of these things and really regain that respect. And so they sold pizzas to each other and raised this money for this check of $5,000. It would truly, we were at a point of just kind of like, where's the next money going to come from? We don't know. And we just thought we were going to do this presentation. We had no idea they were going to walk up to us and give us this check. It was just, yeah, it was quite a moment. Love that. So, quite a moment. Next. All right, so almost 30 completed cases since 2018. We obviously, the pause during COVID, we learned how to do things online with Zoom as well, and yet to create it in a safe way that they could participate, which is important too when you're doing things over Zoom that have to do with legal things. So that took a process. We have 14 active truancy cases right now, 135 participants total since conception. And as we said before, we recruit annually facilitators so that we can keep this up and going and sustainable. So that's that 16-hour training. Next. So this fall, the big thing is going to be, as I said before, the circle training is what we're going to really try to incorporate more. District Attorney Molly Hicken has some situations in the community that really would be effective, and she's requested as well that we start learning healing circles so that we can have more community members involved, and so that's actually our next pursuit that will be. We don't have the dates yet, but we're working on getting that together. Okay, next. And the energy of forgiveness. I thought this was Dr. Mark Umbright is well known for his influence with restorative practices. The emotional energy behind all of our communities, verbal or nonverbal, influences the manner in which we both respond to severe conflicts or traumatic events, and are perceived by those who have harmed us. When resolution processes allow toxic energy to be released in healthy ways, it opens the way to finding peace as we experience transformation and healing and perhaps even forgiveness. Next slide. So we just want to thank you for even asking us to come. This opportunity has been delightful, and please don't hesitate to pull me aside at some point. Reach out to us and if you have any questions. So thank you all.
Well, Inger, we want to thank you so much and hope you'll send us the PowerPoint presentation. We would all love to have it, and also to share it with the public. I think it's really important to educate our community about the value of this. I had an opportunity to be involved in restorative justice back in the 90s. And to see how it's transformed, to see you with restorative circles and looking at healing circles, I'm just really impressed. And the way you've incorporated technology, because I remember all the paperwork we had to do, and I just think you've done an amazing job of putting this all together to benefit those 135 participants that we've had so far. And I can't wait to get some updated training. I'm really excited about the program. So thank you for bringing this to us.
Thank you. Will do. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day. All right. Well, we have some other presentations, 4 more presentations, in fact, this morning. And we're running a little bit behind schedule. But our next presentation, appropriately, is our county attorney about stuff.
And thank you, Madam Chair. At the time that we put the agenda together last week, Molly was expecting to be here. And turns out that she cannot be here today. So I'm going to give you a very, very abbreviated version of what Molly would have talked about. And I guess I just want to say thanks to the folks who are leaving. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for your work, too, your service and volunteerism. Clearly makes a huge difference. And
Sure does.
I want to support this much.
Thank you. And thanks for your support of the program. It's very important to have formal community support. We appreciate that.
So, as you are probably aware, over the last year, the workload in the county attorney's office has been significant. There have been a number of major trials that have required all hands on deck. And so both Molly and Jean Munson have been very busy, as have Kathy Ann and Diana. The whole team has really been busy. And where this has had an impact, I mean, obviously, you know, it has a huge impact in terms of being able to prosecute cases and achieve justice as much as possible when there are complaints. But it has also limited the amount of time that the county attorney's office has available for other functions, which includes supporting you all, the board, and supporting my office. And so it's been very difficult for all concerned getting, when we have, you know, contracts to process and that kind of thing. It is, and this is not pointing a finger at anyone, but the time constraints have been so extreme, the time burdens have been so extreme on the county attorney's office, that it has been very difficult for us to be able to process contracts in a timely way, to get counsel on various legal matters. And I think probably this board has been aware of that. Even before the really heavy trial schedule started earlier this year. As we were doing budget planning last year, Molly was talking about the workload up there and about how having another assistant attorney would be really beneficial, that the workload has increased to a point where they could use another staff person up there. And the way she described it to me is that the two assistant attorneys would be handling more of the day-to-day kind of criminal stuff and civil stuff, and that Molly would divide her time between criminal cases and providing counsel to the board and the organization. And that counsel is vitally important in our work, because we frequently come across issues related to various land use cases that require her office's involvement. And to the extent that they are overburdened and unable to respond to our requests for assistance in a timely way, that puts the whole organization at a disadvantage. So that's as much as I can say about it right now. We will have Molly come in and talk to you all in more detail about how that has looked on their end. But there will be a request in the FY24 budget proposal for an additional staff person in the county attorney's office. So this was intended to give you all a heads up on that request, so you can be thinking about it. And again, I'm sure you have questions, which I'm probably not in a position to answer. But when we're able to get Molly here, she can address those. So, yeah.
I do have one question.
Sure.
You probably know the answer to. I'm remembering previous budgets had a professional contract line item
Yes.
that we have budgeted for extra help. Like Molly says, she doesn't have the expertise for
Right.
land use things, so that's that budget line item.
Great question. And that's,
Remember the amount?
no,
Okay.
no, absolutely not. I don't. I can get that for you. But I would expect that to continue to be an item in the budget, simply because there are specialty areas of law that I know, even if Molly had more time to use to advise us, there would still be instances where we would need that specialized counsel outside the organization. Whether that item would be reduced in cost, I don't know. That's something Molly would have to address.
But it makes me wonder, okay, so if we are thinking about an assistant county attorney, then we hire somebody with maybe some certain skills
Mhm.
that we currently don't have.
Right.
And wondering if, I don't remember that number, but if that could offset some of those.
It would certainly be nice to broaden our knowledge base within the attorney's office, yeah. I mean, and they're very good at what they do, not suggesting that they don't, but I mean, there's so many specialized areas of law where, you know, it really, you have to have, like, you know, our counsel here in town, they do nothing but land use cases. And so they have that really broad area of knowledge in that specific field. There are a number of instances where we might not require that kind of specialty knowledge, but frequently it is the case. And things like labor law, highly specialized, and we have outside counsel for that as well. So, but your suggestion that maybe we could broaden the knowledge base within the attorney's office with a new hiring is a really good one. I'm sure Molly could address that.
I think clearly as commissioners, we're all aware of the needs and that, you know, things are kind of waiting and pending because of the challenges and all the workload that the county attorney's office has experienced, not just in the last year, but, you know, it seems to be having been increased over time, and I think Judge Cuzzo this morning talked about that as well. So we'll look forward to visiting with Molly, and thank you for the update.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I thought the Judge Cuzzo, that, and then the restorative justice side of things, like, I always try to think about how we can address things upstream so that we don't have these more expensive processes, and so I'm a huge fan of the restorative justice. I think Judge Cuzzo is a fan as well, but yeah, it was concerning to hear that he's seeing more and more cases, and that he's more working on the court system, on the attorney's office, and all of that.
That's nice. All right, well, we'll look forward to.
What was that? Just good. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Commissioner Mills. All right, we're going to move on to our regional solid waste plan update, and I see that Tim Nelson is with us.
Do I need this?
You don't have to
No.
stay.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I was
I was
just
gonna say,
giving
I'm
you this as a parting gift.
Thank you.
It's just a copy of
You shouldn't.
Powerful.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm opening it right now. Hold on.
Is the flipper not working?
Why don't you grab the microphone just
So
so we can.
how do you define working?
Is it Jana's finger? Did it? Okay, just in case I do have abbreviated, I did print out copies for people.
Now that I have the whole Bible of it.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate this.
Oh, the plan,
Yeah.
yes,
The plan.
yeah.
This should be it. If it doesn't
Must
work,
have
you
been
can just
smoke,
like
huh?
see next slide.
Okay.
I downloaded it, and it was a
The batteries,
big
yeah.
document.
Well, the light is coming on.
The
Okay.
old-fashioned way.
Yes, I will, then, yeah, keep your finger on the key, because there's a lot of ones to turn, but I got one for each one. Okay, this is on Cook County's place in the Regional Solid Waste Management Planning Initiative, and I entitled it that because I couldn't come up with a longer name for it.
We don't have an acronym.
Yeah, well, there are acronyms in the presentation, but I'll talk about those as we go. So this is a process that had been started a few years back, and it is an interesting process. It's not the best process we've been involved in. It's not the worst process. So there are certainly some lessons coming out of that. We wish that there had been better engagement with the consultants that have been retained earlier on. The first part of the process was kind of the best in terms of gauging all the user groups and all the interested parties. We did have a lot of involvement with that. The waste management companies, everybody involved was able to participate in that portion. It's as it was coming to the end and making sure we had a document that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency was going to accept is where we kind of ran into a little bit of rubs. And we ended up finishing off the plan with just the technical staff and the Pollution Control Agency themselves. We kind of went back and forth doing that. So we'll go ahead and start. So about the solid waste management plan update, go ahead. Next. Yeah, it's required by the state of Minnesota every 10 years. We get our SCORE funds. We have to have the plan in place to be able to receive our SCORE funding. Interestingly enough, when I started in Clearwater County some 30 years ago or so, with the SCORE funds as a minimum baseline was $55,000 per county. And now it's up to about 85, something like that. So it's gone up $1,000 per year, not each year, but in increments. So it's not gone up that much since then, but that is the grant that we do get from that. Next slide. That was 2, but last plan update was in 2011. That plan that we did in 2011 was an individual plan. We did that just as our county. We retained I'm trying to think of the consultant's name for that. In any case, we retained a consultant for that. It cost us $22,000 for it, and we just looked at it, ourselves and updated it in that sense. Go ahead, next slide. And this plan is the first regional plan. It was not the first attempt. We were looking at getting and doing a regional plan back in the mid to late 90s, starting in 96, but it just didn't come together. Everybody couldn't come to an agreement at that point. So this is the first actual regional plan. It's the Arrowhead region. It's the 7 counties plus the Western Lake Superior Sanitary District, also affectionately known as Whistle D. And it's all the Arrowhead counties are going out to Cooch and down to Carlton, Aiken, Itasca, St. Louis, Lake, and Cook. So the cost for us in this go-around is approximately $1,600, so all the better for us in that respect. And this next slide says why. The total amount of MSW, which is municipal solid waste, which is just your household garbage, is 167,000 tons in the region, and Cook County makes up less than 2% of that. So we're obviously, by our population and everything else, one of the small players in the game, and we're also the most remote, extended way out in terms of infrastructure. Next slide. So in 1999, back when I started, Cook County had 7 waste haulers, and we had the landfill that was up the Gunflint Trail, about 6.5 miles up there. Now we're down to 1. Over the course of the development of this particular plan, we had 2 waste haulers, the West End haulers, Nelson Machine Products, and then North Shore Waste on this east side. And now it is all just 100% North Shore waste. And so we have a lot of opportunity to be able to work with them. We know that Dustin and Barry are very open and excited about working with us and with their customer base and such to get more services in place. Next slide, please. And all the MSW, or municipal solid waste, is managed by the private sector. There was a conscious decision made by the commissioners at the point in time when we closed our municipal solid waste landfill. Starting in 99 through about 2001, they made the decision that we were not going to get involved. If the private sector was going to manage solid waste, we're going to let the private sector manage solid waste, and we're not going to get in. Some counties manage solid waste and then they contract with employees, or they have their own fleet of vehicles. Larger cities do that as well. We're completely out. We don't dictate flow control. That's another way in which some counties manage solid waste, is they'll make a designation. You have to take your solid waste to this facility, and that's done to try to buy down debts and things like that. We're not beholden to any particular facility. We don't have an actual agreement with WLSSD. It's the private hauler that has the agreements with WLSSD. We do work with WLSSD or the Western Lake Superior Sanitary District in other areas, just not with the garbage. They manage a transfer station that's in Duluth as well. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so no, that's fine. Why regional planning? Well, we wanted to evaluate all of the various disposal options. This is looking at specifically MSW, or municipal solid waste. The Superior landfill closes in 2026, and that was kind of the big impetus to get this going, and it just kind of lined up with the plan updates. And if you look, you notice I said to begin with, our last plan update was in 2011, and that we're past that that date. And what the state did is they said, we're going to just waive all of the deadlines for the plan updates because you're working regionally, and we'll just all combine them into this plan. And so this will set the benchmark for the next update. So the Superior landfill closing in 2026, like I said, is a big impetus, because that's where all of the waste from the transfer station in Duluth, which is where all of our waste goes to this point down to the transfer station, that closes. And so they really need to look at disposal options. Go ahead, next. You want to look for program efficiencies and increase in economies of scale, looking at better ways to be able to maybe market our recycled materials or things like that. We actually have, through the course of the evaluation of this review, we have a good return on our recyclable materials through Hartels right now in Proctor, and looking at the types of activities that they were looking to do on a regional basis, we weren't going to get any kind of a better flow. We will continue, and that's the nice thing about this particular plan. We're not beholden to get involved into those initiatives that they're doing, but we certainly, the door is open for us to be able to continue to negotiate with them and to look for partnerships where we can. Next. Partner with the closest neighbors. We have Grand Portage and Lake County are our closest neighbors, and coincidentally, Lake County has an existing grant that they are looking for participation with us and Grand Portage in with the what's called source separated organics materials for composting and such. They're looking to do originally a facility in Finland, but we're also looking to do if there's any ways to be able to enhance what we have going here and maybe have bins for people and things like that. So that's a function that's already kind of in the works right now. We'll be carrying that on. So the areas of waste considered in the management plan, these are all the different types and areas of waste. Go ahead. Is the mixed municipal solid waste and the facilities and waste flows. And if you look at that behemoth of a document, the plan document, and it shows the mapping and where would it be. Well, what counties need to be able to create a facility, a land facility especially, they need what's called a certificate of need. And so they need the dedication of or commitment of materials to go to a facility while the state considers, is it viable enough to be able to grant a permit for. So like I said, we don't have the agreement with WLSSD, but the private waste haulers do. So they get the agreement with them, and then they can say, we have this much in waste with all of their combined stuff, which adds to that certificate of need. Next, recycling. As I indicated, we've got a pretty good deal going, even though recycling is one of those really more volatile markets for us. It's gone up, it's gone down. It's recovered for us right now a little bit, surprisingly. The forecast had been still a continued downward trend, but this year in '23 we're actually doing pretty good in that. But that's just one of the materials. Go ahead, next.
I'm sorry. Are plastics a revenue generator at this point, or are they still a loss?
What generates revenue is actually the numbers of materials actually gets smaller and smaller, and it's unfortunate. It's finally kind of coming out that the numbers, we do the numbers 1 and 2, and we have to focus on that because those are the ones that are actually recycled. The other ones, if they're processed or are reused, they're not actually recycled, but even though they have the numbers on them, so we end up paying in for that. So there are some commodities that we actually pay into. I think for the 1s and 2s, though, if we have that isolated and a clean waste stream, we do get some redemption value off of that.
Because that's a change. I mean, for a long time, there was no value there.
Right, and we did have mixed plastics for the longest time where we had all numbers, and we got nothing for that, and we ended up paying. And so through our discussions with our broker in Proctor, we determined that, well, let's just eliminate the ones that cannot be recycled and focus on the ones that can and generate a revenue stream for us, albeit rather small.
Right.
Yeah. Next, household hazardous waste. And yard waste, those are ones we have kind of existing programs. We have our, with household hazardous waste, we've got the collections up at the recycling center, and we contract with the Western Lake Superior Sanitary District, to assist us with that. And then, and also in addition to that, we get calls throughout the course of the year. People can, from here, bring their household hazardous waste directly to the facility in Duluth and drop it off for free. That is available. Plus, if somebody, like a relative passes or something and they have a storage of hazardous waste materials, we do have that locker that's set up outside the recycling center. We got it from California. It's earthquake proof. It's fire suppressant mechanics inside and a graded floor, so that and it's separated in by components, so you don't mix acid and bases and things like that. We have that available too throughout the year. Yard waste, we do have that up at the recycling center, and we do encourage people to go ahead and compost. There again, this the source separated organic materials. That's the food waste. That's the one that we're really going to be paying a lot more attention to in the coming years here. Construction demolition waste, problem materials. Those are handled primarily through the private waste haulers and sectors. And then that final one, source reduction and education. We partner up occasionally with the region. There's the Northeast Waste Advisory Council, which we belong to, and then there's also the technical branch of that, which is the solid waste administrators or officers of the Northeast region, or SWOONers, and the Northeast Waste Advisory Council is termed as NUAC, and we have commissioner participation in that organization. So takeaways from the solid waste plan for the garbage, the regular household garbage, we're going to continue to just, nothing will change. They're going to continue to haul the waste from our county because it's just a direct route to the transfer station in Duluth. That's not going to change. They did a bunch of calculations in the plan. Certainly the easiest right now alternative is for us to continue with Superior, but that's not going to be an alternative in 2026 when they close down. So then they just have to look for the next place. So what's going to happen when that closes down is all of our regular garbage is still going to go there, but then it would expect the prices to increase in transportation costs because it'll not go just to the Superior landfill, but it'll go up to a different land disposal facility, which is why it's always kind of imperative for us to look at ways to either reduce the amount of waste, recycle, or reuse what we have. Next, continue to evaluate ways to increase the numbers of recyclable materials that we have. That's, we'll certainly be looking and working with North Shore Waste and trying to expand whether there would be maybe collection services in the city of Grand Marais or what have you, or additional of trailers in the remote locations and such. But, always looking for ways to be able to increase the amounts and numbers. I would say that the state of Minnesota requires that we have 4 types of materials: paper, tin, whatever. We actually have way more in terms of the numbers of types of materials that are required for us to recycle, but that's kind of who we are as a community. Everybody's interested in making sure that we do recycle when we have that opportunity. Next, the household hazardous waste program and arrangements are going to continue the same. We have the collections. There is also the paint care program that goes through the private, the hardware stores and such. They take what they call architectural paint, the household paints and stains and such like that free as well. Next, please. The existing yard waste, we're going to continue that. We'll continue that. We're there, but we're going to also put that as a part of the discussion with the source-separated organics materials and looking at the composting options. Can we combine these? How can we make it better efficiencies and such? I think if you put the next one up, I think that's the source separated. Yeah, so collaborate and look for ways with the Grand Portage, Lake County, and the private sector to look for places and look for methods to be able to increase all of the composting that we do here. We know that businesses in the area are looking for ways to be able to deal with the food wastes and such, and composting is far better than throwing them out. It's been logistically just not feasible for us to transport them all the way to Duluth, but it is feasible for us to arrange for something more closer by to be able to take advantage of that. Next, please. And then It's our responsibility to continue to monitor, all of these things to make sure that they're done appropriately. So the construction, demolition waste, problem materials, tires, those kinds of things that, we used to, when we had the facilities, we used to hold amnesty days where we would take in appliances or we would take in tires. Right now, that's all managed through the private sector. We could have discussions about doing another amnesty at some point in time as we go. I know that there's been some interest in that, and we certainly can entertain that. Did you have a?
I just know that one of our AMC neighbors recently did an amnesty program for their community and got a lot of junk out of the woods and people's front yards, and so I was going to inquire about that, so good to hear.
Yeah, we used to do those in the spring and the fall, and then we went down to once per year, and then when we got rid of the transfer station landfill up at the landfill area, then we just kind of stopped doing it altogether. But it is definitely worth discussions on that. We do have our e-waste, but it's a charged thing.
Right, and that's this coming Saturday.
That is, yes it is.
9 to 1.
Do you need an appointment for that?
No. Nope, you just come out. And then to increase public educational efforts, always looking for ways to do that. And like I said, we try to partner up with WSSD to get promotional materials and such to be able to advertise for that. And the next steps for us, so we're currently with this plan, and while we're talking about this, is that it is out on public notice. If you saw that it has gone out for public notice, and it is region-wide. And so the MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, is expecting comments, a lot of comments they heard during the course of the development of the plan from those areas where new facilities are either being put into place or facilities are being expanded. So they don't know, as of this point, they don't know as of this point if there's going to be a lot of public comment sufficient to the point for them to have to put it on hold. You can put the next one up. I think that's what I have there. Yeah, if it's sufficient to make adjustments, adoption would be put on hold until all of those comments would be addressed. Sometimes there's enough comment that's put into place where they actually have to have a public hearing. So we won't know that yet until the end of the public comment period. But if the public comments can be easily addressed, then I would be coming back to you in the course of time to formally adopt the plan. Next. Who can say it's a bad presentation, huh? Go on. I had to end up with the cute puppy.
So does the person go to the MPCA website or our own website? How do you do a public comment?
The comments are for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. If anybody wanted to submit them to us, it would be to me, and then I would forward them on. But the direct route is to the Pollution Control Agency is the best way.
Other questions for Tim? Well, thank you. It's been really informative, and we appreciate all the good work you do to keep our county clean, environmentally as well as otherwise. And thanks for the electronics recycling event this Saturday. I'm sure many of us will be contributing.
My microwave went out this last week, so I will be participating. Yeah, I guess.
We'll see you in the long line.
In the long line.
Tip to the public, don't go right at 9 o'clock.
Oh,
wait
boy.
a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you'll get right in.
And in my cleaning, I found a box of toxic stuff that I put together last fall, and it's like, any day now, I'd like you to say, bring it in.
That's July. It's the last Saturday in July, or the second to last Saturday. It's the 24th or whatever that
Yeah,
last.
second to the last.
Yeah. So that is coming next month.
Well, thank you
No
so
other
much.
questions?
We
All right.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time.
All right. Well, you did a great job of keeping us on track, Mr. Nelson.
All right,
and
that was my goal.
means that Leah will be able to present promptly.
Does anybody need a short break?
You're ahead of schedule.
do it, it's her.
Well, that's why we're reluctant.
I should say, does anybody else?
Does anybody else? All right, we'll take a short break. Administrator Yorkie. All right. All right, well, welcome back, everyone, to our Cook County Board of Commissioners special meeting. We're returning from a short break, and we're here today to talk with Leah Ekstrom, our HR director, about job description reviews.
Yes, well, and I wanted to meet with you all. We're in a process, as you well know, undertaking all of our job descriptions and reviewing them with David Drown Associates. And so it was one we kicked off on May 1st and started the process, and so wanted to meet with you just to keep you updated, and would like to continue to do this during the process so that we all are kind of on the same page with where we're at and where it's going. So we've started off with our first few. We have some completed that will be coming to you next week at the regular board meeting, but just wanted to talk in advance about where we're at. So we have 5 coming back, or 5 at this point coming next week to the board for approval, if I can spit that out. And then right now we have we have about 9 underway that are in the process of just being reviewed, and then employees reviewing them, some appealing if they feel that their job description needed updating further. Some are at the classification process point with DDA, so hopefully we'll be getting those back. And then employees, after they receive that classification notice, also again have a chance to appeal that with David Drown Associates so that they can have a say in how everything looks before they're finalized. And so really where we're at right now, like I said, I have 5 hopefully coming in next week to be approved. We have our Public Health and Human Services Fiscal Supervisor, our Highway Clerk. Land Services has 3. They have 1 new position that they'll be talking about more detail for the Rental Administration and Compliance Officer, as well as a slight restructure within their department of 2 other positions, our Land Use Specialist and Trails Coordinator, Wetland Specialist. I can spit all those names out there, a mouthful. So those are ones we're coming at with. And I did want to say, those have been through the whole process, like I talked about, the job review, appeals, the classification appeals, and they're coming in actually slightly higher than they had been graded in the past. 1 was new, so it's a new position that we weren't aware of, but did want to put that out there. And there's a number of reasons why we're seeing them come in slightly higher. The reason that these were at the beginning of the job description review process is because when we had done our compensation study last year, we had seen that there were some job descriptions that were out of alignment with comparable jobs within the state. And so those had been prioritized, as well as those that had been not reviewed since probably 2016 or 2017. Those are the ones that we prioritized within our job review list. So yeah, so we're looking at those coming in.
Part of the reason that we wanted to meet with you in the committee of the whole to give you a heads up on this is because we, first of all, didn't want to just kind of bring it up in a meeting and ask you to act on it immediately. The other thing is we kind of had the expectation that these initial jobs might come back higher because they hadn't been looked at for so long. It would be really helpful if we could just do all of them like immediately and know like which, across the whole range of job descriptions, which ones are changing, because that would enable us to get the big picture in terms of financial impact. We don't have that big picture right now. And so in terms of how we are going to address these positions that are coming back graded higher than they were previously, it won't be possible to know the overall financial impact. And what I'm thinking is that we need to take a cautious approach in how these get phased in. Initially, my thought was if people get bumped up a grade, then what we do is we take their whatever their current pay rate is at the current grade and move them up to the next grade at the step that is just above the dollar amount that they're currently earning. So it wouldn't be, for example, if you're currently at a step 7 And the step that most closely corresponds to your current pay rate in the next grade is like a step 5, then you would get slotted in there versus just going from a 7 to a 7. You know, in the interest, I mean, I know that staff are probably going to say, well, that's not fair. If I'm at a step 7, I should be at a step 7. And again, I think we have to, because we are still in the process of phasing in the market adjustments that we made as a result of the wage study. We need to be cautious about the overall impact of the levy, and that's my recommendation in terms of how we do this. I'm hopeful that as we continue to go through this process, that future job description reviews, we'll see less of that kind of jump in grade. But until we actually get there, we're not going to know for sure. So wanted to give you a heads up on that and to give you a chance to ask questions and to let you know what I'm thinking about how this is going to move forward. I think there's probably a discussion that we'll need to have with staff about it. But again, because we are in the process of trying to phase in the market adjustments, we want to be cautious that we don't overburden the levy.
I'll just make a comment too that when we've upgraded or reviewed jobs over the years, and as they do go up, that has been our past practice as to how people are implemented into those new grades. Just what James had explained. So that is our past practice as how that has been done before.
So a question I had, Leah, was how many jobs did you review that fall into that category where they need to be moved up?
How many currently are coming next week?
Correct.
That need to be moved up? There'll be 4.
4 of the 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Well, and 1 is new, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm not surprised, given that we haven't reviewed some of those since 2016, that's the case. That also shows us why we need to do these more regularly. It's really important not to fall so far behind.
Yep.
So I'm hopeful that although we'll be in catch-up mode for a little while, we're going to get to the point where we're on better ground and more predictable ground.
I think so, especially as we move forward with more job descriptions. Like I said, that's kind of how we prioritized them, given that they were looking out of alignment with the compensation study. And the age of a lot of them.
Yeah.
So as we keep up and then keep up to date and continue this process, I every 3 years, you'd want to be reviewing job descriptions so that you're not making these markable changes, both within duties, which is a lot of it, as well as market analysis.
All right, well, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yes.
Yeah.
You asked one of mine, but
Okay.
my next one that I wrote down here is, of those 5, how many were appealed?
Appealed in terms
By
of
the employees.
as far as the classification, none of them. When we got to the job description review process, 2 of them had been, appealed.
And so, is it possible for us, do you have a red line job description that you could send us to compare what got changed, what
I
was
do.
eliminated?
Yep,
Okay.
I do.
would appreciate
Except for the
that.
new one. I don't have it for that one.
Okay.
But for the other ones, yes, I do have some red line. It wasn't what I was going to present to the board.
Well, that's why I wondered if you can just send that out,
Yeah.
not in the board packet,
Yep.
just to the commission.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
just
we have it-
background it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that when we see this is the new job
Yes.
description, I don't have to look at
Here's
it
what
through
we're
what- what
compared
it used
line
to
by
be.
line.
Yeah.
Yes, yep, I do have.
That-
Yep,
I would
and
appreciate it
Oh,
in that
absolutely.
form.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Leah?
I'm making
And
my notes.
so in that appeals process where the employee
Yes.
gets to disagree with what DDA is
Mhm.
put on it,
Mhm.
how long does that usually take? Is it a week, 2 weeks, or does it?
It depends on when people
Okay.
take the time to do it. typically it's about 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'll just say that's a good average, between an employee having the time to really review it and making that time, you know, some schedules are busy, sometimes people are on vacation. And then when DDA has a chance to review it, compare, and then make the changes, it's about 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the time frame, I'd say turnaround on average, and again, very dependent on when someone has time to really review these job descriptions. It's about 4 to 6 weeks is what I've been looking at. So.
Other questions? All right, well, thank you very much, Leah. We appreciate the heads up and the information we'll be getting to help us do our homework before next board meeting.
Yes, and as we continue moving forward too, you know, if there's ways to be more helpful in showing you how, the progress is going.
All right.
We're happy to, facilitate however works best.
Good, thanks.
Excellent. All right, well, have a great day. We appreciate all you do for us.
Making my notes.
All right. So, now to talk about a Supreme Court ruling on tax forfeited properties. We have Assessor Thompson with us. We've been looking at how we can work with tax forfeited properties. We've talked about developing some types of policies, and so we have been waiting to see what's going to happen with this, knowing it will have implications on our practice and policies. So thank you for coming to us today and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So, you know, we've kind of touched on this subject in the past about the Supreme Court ruling on the Geraldine Tyler case in Hennepin County. I have been to a couple of meetings with the Association of Land Commissioners, and we've had 2 listening sessions now with the Department of Revenue. Sounds like the Revenue Department is meeting with a number of different interested parties, you know, the auditors groups, the land commissioners, and, you know, just various organizations throughout the state to kind of get some input and kind of just discuss what's going on and where they're at right now. I did send an email to Jonna with a slide from NACO. I just sent it to you a little bit ago, but there's 9 slides, and it just kind of gives a quick overview of the Supreme Court decision and what some of those implications are going to be. So we'll wait till we get that pulled up, and then we'll just go through those slides, and then, you know, I can kind of discuss how Cook County is affected by this. You know, we haven't had many sales, and especially not recently. So we're affected a little different than like St. Louis County, where they have, you know, a couple $1 million in sales every year. So we may have more to worry about or less to worry about. It depends on how you look at it and what may come out of all of this.
Nothing more fun than working while other people are waiting.
Yeah.
Well, it gives us a chance to listen to the seagulls in the background and kind of relax.
It's getting warm out there again.
Yay, finally. I've been freezing.
Yeah, I prefer it that
Down by
way.
the lake anyway.
We
Yeah.
built a fire in the fireplace the other morning. Because
You
it was
gave up
60
fine.
degrees,
Yeah.
60 degrees in the house. And it's like, what? I don't know, just need to get warm.
In June.
I know.
It's no problem. I can just actually probably read them. That was kind of what I was planning on doing. I was actually going to print them out, but our printer was on the fritz this morning, so we're waiting for Toshiba to come out. But, so the plaintiff in this case, she owned a condominium in Minneapolis. She stopped paying taxes, owed about $15,000 in unpaid state property taxes with the penalties and interest and all that. She received notice of foreclosure, failed to respond, and then never tried to redeem the property during the 3-year period. She also didn't seek to repurchase the property, which is an option they have as a homesteader. Hennepin County sold the property for $40,000 and kept the surplus over the $15,000 that was owed. pursuant to the state law. So the Supreme Court looked at two issues, whether that taking and selling a home to satisfy a debt to the government and keeping that surplus value as a windfall, if that violates the Fifth Amendment's taking clause. And then also, second issue was whether the forfeiture of a property worth more than what was needed to satisfy the debt, plus the interest, penalties, and costs, is a fine within the meaning of the Eighth Amendment. So seeing if it was constitutional to keep that surplus or excess funds.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's okay. I can send this PowerPoint out to the commissioners, and I'm sure you guys, if you haven't seen this PowerPoint, you'll probably see it at some point. It's from the National Association of Counties. So the holding of the case was that 9-0, it was a, 9-0, authored by Chief Justice Roberts, that the county violated the takings clause by keeping the surplus equity. The court relied on history and precedent to support its holding. History dating all the way back to Magna Carta was discussed during the trial. So the excessive fines clause, because the majority concluded that this was a taking, the court didn't reach this excessive fines question. They would have likely found that the excessive fine clause was violated, or at least, believed that the lower court's analysis of that front was incorrect. The two lower courts, the district court and the Court of Appeals, both ruled in favor of Hennepin County before the Supreme Court took this on. So, the local government legal center brief argued principles of federalism dictate that courts should not interfere with the administration of state taxes in case like this, where there are adequate procedural safeguards. So, all of these off-ramps for Ms. Tyler to get her property back in the redemption period that was there. They also discussed the practical implications of a ruling in favor of the property owner, meaning that all of our statutes surrounding tax forfeiture and the apportionments of revenues from tax forfeit properties is all going to have to be restructured and rewritten. So the implications for the counties at this point, there are 36 states that require the excess equity be returned to the property owner. It's not uncommon. Actually, the majority of states do require that excess be returned to the property owner. Minnesota state laws will need to be updated, and counties should avoid keeping any surplus equity from foreclosed property sales going forward. The question that remains out there is what amount is owed to the property owner? And then are there going to be lawsuits? Well, there have been in other counties already class action lawsuits filed by people who lost their homes or properties through forfeiture. And then there's an open question on interest fees and tax debt. The court said that these aren't takings, but if a county tried to increase these fees and fines for any sort of punitive purpose, that could run afoul in the excessive fines clause. So, it's not that we can just raise the fine for a forfeiture and the fees involved with it to cover some of these costs. I know most counties were showing how typically when a forfeiture happens, they're not making any money on this forfeiture. It would be like a gas station that had soil contamination, condemned buildings, so all the remediation of that site offsets or far exceeds in most cases what they're going to sell it on the market when it's all been fully brought back up to building standards where soil contamination has been mitigated and all that. So, we've had some conversations in our group. Like I said, we met with the Department of Revenue, and some of the things that, they're really just gathering information. They're seeing how counties have been handling them, how they're gonna handle them moving forward. There was some discussion from St. Louis County, what should we do in the interim until new laws are written? And, it kind of seems like everyone's on the same page that you can kind of proceed with business as usual, other than the excess revenue and spending that where that goes. So, if you had a sale planned and you went through with the sale, hold on to that revenue. Don't allocate it to, typically it goes to Memorial Forest Fund, Land Commissioner budget, and then allocated to the schools, county, and township if there is one. So that is kind of the big takeaways. You know, one thing that I brought up and the attorney from the Department of Revenue was really kind of agreeing with was, if, let's say we have a forfeiture, tax forfeiture in Cook County, and this property had a lien on it from, say, a local bank or a national bank where they had a mortgage. If what I'm to understand is the Supreme Court is saying that Hennepin County should have just given that money back to Ms. Tyler with no regard to those lien holders. And I'm wondering if this is going to become some kind of a way around paying a mortgage, because you would still have that on your credit report as a defaulted mortgage. But would the county be selling this property and just giving the money back to the property owner at their discretion with what to do with it? I mean, that to me seems like it's a huge question. The Department of Revenue kind of shook their head and said, yeah, you know, the way that the Supreme Court ruled on this, they ruled as if after a forfeiture you still have an interest in the property, which you don't, you know, per the current statutes that are out there. So there were actually a couple, you know, with the Supreme Court pending last year during the session, there were a couple of lawmakers that wrote up some bills that would do effectively just this, and it gets rid of this apportionment statute. It's 282.08, I think. So the apportionment statute says, you know, any revenues or funds from a sale from a tax forfeit property gets allocated this way. You know, XYZ goes to this, this, and this. And essentially the bills that were proposed last year just struck that language out and wrote all of the proceeds go back to the previous owner at the time of forfeiture, which, you know, that doesn't cover these lien holders. I mean, if you had a $800,000 mortgage, you let the county sell it for $800,000 and they give you the check for it, you know, it's the difference of the taxes. I mean, how does that lien holder get made whole? Is the county going to have to seek out lien holders and make sure that they're, and then how do you prioritize which lien holder comes before the other? You know, you may have multiple mechanics liens or something like that. So it really gets messy. I would not want to be the ones trying to come up with how you correct this in our state statute. There's, you know, you change a statute here and it affects this, this, and this, and it's just a mess. One thing I will say with Cook County is, as far as I know, we haven't had a sale other than to a relative of the previous owner. I think we had one sale up in Creechville. Other than that, we haven't had a sale that I can think of since the time I've been here, that of a tax forfeiture specifically. So, you know, what we talked about with the St. Louis County Attorney was that the claims that could be filed here are usually a 6-year statute of limitations. So now what the question remains is, like, these legacy parcels, say something that was forfeited back in 1930 and became possession of the county back then, or held in title for the county by the state of Minnesota. What happens with those legacy parcels if there are still heirs around today to come and say, hey, well, you know, you forfeited and you haven't sold or disposed of this property? You know, I could see somebody coming along and saying, hey, I want you to sell my grandpa's lot and I want the revenue, I want the excess funds over what he was owed in taxes. I mean, it becomes a really difficult situation for some of these unique scenarios, especially up in northern Minnesota, where some of these counties are, you know, managing 100,000 acres of tax forfeit land. Cook County is in a little bit more secure of a position where we don't have timber revenues coming from tax forfeitures. You know, we don't have a lot of these things that some of these other counties are relying on, entire land departments that are relying on that revenue from properties that have been forfeited for more than 70, 80 years. So there's a lot of unique scenarios and a lot of things that are going to have to be sorted out. I don't know that it's going to be a simple solution. You know, to me, when I look back at Geraldine Tyler, the whole thing to me is a timeline that was completely omitted from the whole discussion. And that if you were to go back to the day that it was forfeited, what it was worth on that day was nowhere near what it sold for 3 or 4 years later. So I don't know if the statute can somehow lay out this, you know, on the day of forfeiture, the value, the appraised value on that date is what's owed back to the owner, because it may take 2 years to mitigate this property And if it appreciates, then, you know, to me, that seems like it should go to the county or the one holding the deed at the time of the appreciation. Because the taxpayer, when they went into forfeiture, they no longer had possession of that deed, that title. So, I mean, that seems like it would be a more simple solution that still allows the counties to have some type of revenue after the forfeiture. Even talking about like revenue streams from income from, you know, sales of timber or things like that, but also sales. You know, if a sale happened 3 years later and Ms. Tyler was owed $12,000, the market value at the time of forfeiture, the county still would have been able to keep some money while Ms. Tyler would have been paid back that equity at the time of forfeiture. But, you know, that seems like it's a simplification of this thing that the Supreme Court obviously made a really big decision on. So we're all kind of in the boat of, we got to wait and see what happens. We have to see how the statutes are rewritten. These listening sessions are, I think, kind of geared around the Department of Revenue looking for a solution and making some suggestions to lawmakers on how they move forward with this. But Brady, you know, would have more information on as far as, you know, our last sales, our last forfeitures. I know we've had a forfeiture or two in the last 6 years. In fact, one of those that was forfeited, I think the gentleman was trying to, you know, pay the tax debt and get the property back. And, you know, we're probably, it's probably in our best interest to look at some of these situations, especially anything in the last six years, to look at those on an individual basis and see how the county feels that we should proceed in compliance with the Supreme Court's rulings.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, you were working on a policy for tax forfeit. Where's that at?
We have a partially developed policy, and then when this thing kind of came up, we kind of pumped the brakes. You know, there's no point in making a flow chart to say how we're going to dispose of a property when, you know, if the revenue from a sale has to go somewhere other than where we thought it was going, it kind of changes the whole thing.
And so there were a couple properties on that on our tax forfeit list that might be appropriate for housing. We didn't know, but it was considered. So I'm wondering, in light of this Supreme Court decision, if the county was to sell it to the HRA for $1, can they do that still?
So this is probably a Attorney Hicken question, where here's the thing is anybody out there who thinks they may have a lawsuit is going to pursue that. You know, anybody could pursue money that they may be entitled to. I think if I was in that situation, if my property was forfeited and then they sold it for $1, I would come with an appraiser and I would say it was worth this much on the date. And you know, that's, to me, that's what I think would happen with a knowledgeable taxpayer that went through forfeiture, is they would look at what was my property worth, and that's what I think the county owes me. I owed, you know, X amount in taxes, subtract that out, this is what you owe me. Now, I don't know how these lien holders are gonna be dealt with. That's the thing about a tax forfeiture, is when a tax forfeiture happens, all of those other lien holders lose. They lose everything. And I just don't know how this looks moving forward, but obviously there are 37 states that are doing it. Michigan actually was a state that used to do it like Minnesota. They used to keep these excess funds. They had a Supreme Court ruling, and it came back now that Michigan is no longer keeping these excess funds. So it's not like it's unprecedented. A lot of states are dealing with this and handling it this way, but Minnesota's definitely going to have to change our statutes on tax forfeitures.
So you're telling me we aren't going to have that land available for housing like I was
We're on
thinking?
pause for right now.
It really throws everything into
Yeah.
It does, and you know, I think that brings up a good point too. If right now when we have a tax forfeiture, the county can look at it and say, well, hey, this would fit a very good public need. We need a park right here. We need a dog park right here. So we're going to ask the state to give us the title to this property so that we can convert it to a public use. Well, how does that get dealt with? There is no excess revenue from a sale. But I think that person who owned the property previously could still come back and say, well, it was worth something. It was worth something to the public, you know, and they're entitled to the difference of what it was worth and what they owed. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. So now how do you approach a tax forfeit property that's been put to some use, like say the parking lot up here in the courthouse? I mean, half of it is tax forfeit. There are some other parcels here and there. I don't think we have any tax forfeit boat landings, but, just tax forfeit parcels in general. We have some gravel pits that are tax forfeited. One of those, I think, even came out of the land exchange for tax forfeit properties we had in the boundary waters that we swapped with the feds. I mean, now how do you deal with that? But it's a big mess that, I think, and the suggestion I made during our meeting with revenue was that any changes to the way the statute is written should be really only looking at moving forward and not retroactively applying statutes. So, if you have a forfeiture moving forward, how do you deal with it moving forward and not looking back at all these things that happened back starting in the early 1900s.
Or the Magna Carta.
1200s. Yeah, so it's kind of just a wait and see game. See how the lawmakers are going to approach it. Like I said, there were a couple of bills proposed early on last year that it looked like they were just trying to voice the same concern that the Supreme Court was taking on and saying this money should be given back to the taxpayers, but it wasn't. They weren't obviously really thought through. It was just a real quick strike those lines and give it back to the taxpayer line. So there's going to have to be a lot more thought going into it. And then I don't know if there's going to be some kind of special approach to these legacy parcels that have been forfeited for 70 years,
Well, we appreciate your update, and I know we'll be reading a lot more about this and hearing a lot more, and it will be a work in progress for quite a while.
Right, and I'm meeting with the land commissioners again on Wednesday. It sounds like they're going to kind of just delegate a couple of people from our group to really follow the revenue meetings, because they're meeting with all these other groups. And the land commissioners wanted to be a part of all those conversations, because their departments are the ones that are affected. That's where their budget comes from, is tax forfeitures. So we will we'll keep an ear and let you know if there's any kind of updates that have any kind of material to them that we could do something with. But in the interim, I know that the state is still giving deeds out when there's a sale. If county is selling a property, as of our meeting last week, they were still issuing deeds on forfeitures. And some of the other counties were doing all business as usual, except for the disposition of the revenues. They're just putting those into an account, holding on to them.
Kind of like Brady's done with our federal PILT situation.
Kind of a wait and see.
We're on hold. Commissioner Hodges.
Yeah, just one more question. I'm still thinking back. So if a property in 1950 was forfeited for, they owed $10,000, is that recorded someplace? Do we know the amount for each one of our tax parcels?
I don't know what the retention period is for that. It's probably 15 years or so. But the thing is if the county didn't dispose of that property, we still own that property. Then there's got to be a record of who was the previous owner. That's something that's in the deeds, recorded in the deeds. But what they owed and all of that, I'm not sure. There's a lot of paperwork downstairs.
Going back to my HRA advocacy here, thinking, well, okay, if it was $15,000, the HRA can buy it for 15 and there's no excess equity.
Yeah, but at that point, they could make that claim that the county sold it for less than market value. And the whole, what St. Louis County was talking about with that 6 years, that's under the wrongful takings. That's a 6-year statute of limitations. So there's more to learn. I'll keep you updated if I hear anything, but I think it's probably going to take a couple of sessions for them to sort out all the details of how we proceed, how counties proceed, and how the state proceeds with forfeitures. One thing I know is that there's a lot of worry that this could cause people to say, well, I don't have to pay my property taxes anymore, because if the county sells it, they're going to just take what I owed them and then they're going to give me all the surplus. I see it becoming an issue if we have a declining market,
Yeah.
if assessments, are lagging a year behind sales that are going down, people may come in and say, hey, you got me assessed at 800, I can't sell it for that, so I'm gonna let you guys sell it for that. And in that situation, opposite of like Geraldine Tyler, it could decrease in value from the time of forfeiture, from there on out. So it's just it's a really terrible consequence to the Supreme Court ruling. And, I really do think that there was a timeline missing from that whole conversation that outlined the equity and where it came from, and the fact that there were so many off-ramps for Ms. Tyler to get that property back before it went into the full forfeiture.
Commissioner White?
Was there an appeals? You can appeal a Supreme
No,
Court
you can't.
decision?
It's the Supreme Court.
Of the United States.
It's the highest one. Decisions by invaluable humans. You got it.
So, yeah, big time implications to the state of Minnesota, and probably the other 12 states that I think do still keep those takings. So.
Well, we won't be holding our breath, waiting for how this will resolve, but we'll keep working at it.
And kind of just pause, I think, everything for the tax forfeitures,
Yeah.
I think we still have to go through with, if somebody stops paying their property taxes, we go through with that normal forfeiture process at this point, but I don't think that we should be jumping to the auction block for sales yet.
I would agree. All right, well, thank you so much. We
Yeah.
appreciate your time and all your work on this.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, we are down to adjournment. And so everyone have a nice day.
Thank you.
All right.
Nice warm day.
Thank you.